Welcome to the Engineering Success Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology, leadership, and innovation. In this episode, we're diving into the critical dynamics between CEOs and CTOs, uncovering how alignment on reporting, decision-making, and team empowerment can drive real business impact. Now over to our host, Himanshu.
For the people who are watching this video, help us get an insight into your career so far. And then how did Who Below happen in this journey?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Himanshu, for having me. My name is Shailesh Hegde, and currently I'm the CEO at Hubilo, which is a modern webinar platform. And our unique perspective is that webinars have been around for a long time, but the tools have not evolved with the times. So we encourage our customers to move away from the tools of the 90s, as we call them, to the tools that you need in 2025. My career has been sort of a roller coaster, a very twisted one in that sense. I started off as an engineer, did not really have the clarity of what I wanted to really do, to be very honest. But I got onto the engineering bandwagon. I understood one thing, that my strength was not in writing code, but in understanding how to break a system. So I was very good at testing and QA. So that's where I started, and I went deep into that area. But after about 8 to 9 years of spending my time over there across a slew of startups and larger companies, I felt I needed to do something broader. I was always interested in this concept of product management. Like, I understood, or I was interested in knowing how product works, why was someone building a feature, but I didn't know there is this role called product management. And this was around the year 2015 is when I kind of seriously thought about it. And I started my product journey in 2016. And my company, Blue Jeans at the time, was very, very encouraging and very supportive in my kind of transition into that role. And I really enjoyed it. So that's when I felt, okay, this is what I was meant to do. And I really enjoyed my product journey over the last 7, 8 years. And Hubilo happened right in the middle of COVID, when Blue Jeans had exited, and I thought I need a different type of experience, something that I had not done before. And the Hubilo opportunity came along. It was something that I had never done before, so I was also a bit nervous about taking it up. But I thought, if not now, then when? And I straight in dove into that. It's been great. The company and all of us in the company have been through a lot in the last 3 years, lots of ups and downs. But now it's another phase of Hubilo, which is really interesting. And along the way, I also got the opportunity to delve into GTM very deeply, and that is also something that I really enjoy now. So I guess my curiosity to go broader and broader kind of got me to where I am right now. And every day as a CEO is a challenge, and I feel like even for a PM or for a CTO, it's the same thing, right? Every day something is on fire or something needs to be fixed. But that's how you kind of keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding. So yeah, it's been a great journey so far, and I'm looking forward to the next 10 years as well.
Awesome. I always like talking to people who have gotten into the entrepreneurship bandwagon and trying to figure things out. Uh, from my experience, and now would want to hear from you that this entrepreneur's bias, your
Mhm.
love for a particular feature or love for something that you want to do and you want to build. But then there is a journey you take, you speak to your customers, or along the process, you realize something that you're building may not be what people want. Uh, so you have to, and at times when you're building something new, you have to maintain that balance between giving an opportunity for people to explore something new while also incorporating what they already want, so that there's a they will accept your product and they'll start using it. So in your journey in the early days of your startup, how did you balance that between solving the real user feedbacks which is coming and also sticking to your own internal roadmap, things that you want to do?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting and difficult problem in that sense, because you tend to go by your instinct about what you feel is right for the customer. Perhaps sometimes you overlook data. You perhaps do not do customer discovery the way it needs to be done. But I can give two perspectives, both from my experience. I don't know what is right, what is wrong. But in Blue Jeans, I remember it was a really powerful meeting application like Zoom, really interesting, really good technology, and the product worked awesome. So it was an established product, established business doing north of like 80 million ARR, right? But at some point, I think we got stuck in existing customers, figuring out stuff for them, doing customizations for them, as opposed to taking a step back, looking at the entire world in terms like in a new lens and understanding why do people really run meetings? Can we make meetings more efficient? Which is what a lot of tools now are doing, right? You got AI generated summaries. And these are some topics that at Blue Jeans we were discussing in 2015, 2016, right? Back then when all of this AI stuff was not there. But because we were held back by existing business obligations and tech debt and whatnot, we couldn't really invest people or money into that aspect of innovation and really taking that to the next level, right? We did a few things, but nearly not enough. And that was the case of us getting bogged down by talking only to our existing customers and their existing problems, whereas taking a step back and looking at, okay, how is the world going to change over the next 10 years? And taking a bet, a very instinctive bet of, okay, this is where the world is going to go, right? On the other hand, on Hubilo, during the crazy times of growth in 2020, 21, 22, we were taking lots of different bets, lots and lots of bets, building a lot of new features, but perhaps not talking to customers as much as we should have in those early days, right? So here it was more of instinct. Let's build this, let's build that. Let's throw multiple things at the wall and see what sticks, which again, I think can lead to burnout. It can lead to a lot of reduction in morale, because if customers don't pick up that feature because it has not been validated, it just does not get used, right? And then engineers, product managers, designers, everyone is like, okay, why did we build this, right? So both sides can happen. I think as a leader, CEO, CTO, VP product, and also the team, I think it's really important to have those honest conversations and bring these things to the table about what are we trying to optimize for? What do we do this quarter? How do we optimize it for the entire year? What kind of balance do we want? Are we talking to enough customers or not? Are we thinking out of the box or not? And how are we kind of bringing that balance, right? So there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's very contextual, but it's important for people to discuss all these different options and decide what is important for them during that year.
I think what makes it more relevant coming from you is I mean, of course, the pivot that you guys did, and how was that decision like for you? Because for decisions like this, usually there is a gestation period for it. You have to get your team on board, and before the team, you have to really convince yourself for this step. So, how was that process like for
Yeah.
you?
Yes, I had to convince myself first that one, the pivot is needed, and two, what should that pivot look like? Vaibhav and I discussed that a pivot is needed based on like the numbers that we were seeing and all of those. So that was fairly easy to kind of take a look at. But the second thing is what next, which is where I knew that I needed to root that in research first, right? So we had a hypothesis that, hey, the webinar market is extremely crowded, but at the same time, there aren't enough good enough products or really excellent products out there, which could take on some of these legacy platforms that have been there for 15, 20 years, right? So there were two things that we did. we looked at the existing market landscape in terms of all the players that are there. We understood their strengths and weaknesses, their features. So it is a pretty deep dive research that we did. And this is where my team really did an amazing job. We divided and conquered that like in a week across like 5 or 6 people, doing deep research on every competitor out there and creating this matrix for us. In parallel, I took the lead on going and having conversations with existing customers of these competitors or the market that we felt we needed to penetrate. Again, if you're too broad, you'll always be in analysis paralysis. So we picked a certain segment that we felt, okay, that was also fairly broad, but we went and said, okay, let's talk to as many people as possible over here. So we had 50 conversations over the course of 4 weeks across different criteria. And this is where I think writing right questions the right way, asking the questions in the right way, figuring out what do you really need to know as an answer to make your decision, and kind of backtracking from there and making your questions ready from a research angle is super important. So again, we created this massive matrix or spreadsheet of questions and answers from different people. We mapped it back to, okay, these are the titles that we spoke to, what is common between these marketing titles versus these other marketing titles, what is common between companies between 50 to 200 employee size as opposed to 1,000 to 5,000. So we tried to categorize and bucket all of these things, and then we concluded that, okay, if we built a product that already needs to solve 10 things that they expect to be solved because the legacy platforms do that. But at the same time, they also have lots of pain points and friction points that we were able to uncover from those research interviews. And we also had some ideas. So this is like the balance, right? The balance is talk to customers, but also put out these ideas, and you have to be careful in how you position those. You position them as problems as opposed to a feature idea, and then you get some new feature idea from that, right? So those become your differentiators. And then we have the third angle, which is parity. Is we know what needs to be done. Even within that parity, these platforms have evolved over 20 years. So they also have a lot of bloat, correct? So it doesn't make sense to copy everything that they have, right? So we try to understand what is bloat from the customer's perspective and what is not. So parity really means what's the most important stuff. The second piece we did is we hypothesized certain problem statements for them. And we said, okay, if this is not solved or how you're solving this, if we did this for you, would that be beneficial type of a thing? We got some differentiators from there. And then we asked the really hard question, which is you're using platform X right now. What would it take for you to move over to another platform? So that becomes what I call the swapper, is a term that I came up with is swapper. If we have this swapper feature, then, and we had all these other things, then is when a customer is going to buy our product, right? So after all of this analysis, we then decided, okay, we have the capability, we have a great team to build what is needed. We already have a virtual event solution, which is actually a pretty complex webinar on its own. So we just had to remove the bells and whistles from that particular product, make it simpler, add these additional swapper features over the period of a few months, and then kind of really launch ourselves over there, right? So this entire exercise took about a month, including the competitive analysis and this direct research and the analysis and takeaways of, okay, this is what our pivot needs to look like. And then we went into the build phase, right? And before going into the build phase, there was an entire kind of set of workshops or meetings that we did to spread this message to the rest of the team. Okay, guys, okay, things are not looking good. We need to pivot, and we are pivoting in this direction because of so-and-so analysis. So that was kind of the whole story behind that. And then we launched the webinar solution, and that has been growing for us.
And until the time you communicated it to the team, was it only you and your CTO, you and Web have involved with this, or did you also involve some other people from your team in this?
The product team was heavily involved, both in the competitor analysis, and some of the senior folks are involved in these research conversations. One person from our product marketing was also there in these research conversations. Kind of again, conquer, try to parallelize as much as possible and bring the right folks into this mix. For those tasks, bringing an engineer would not have made sense. So we basically brought the right folks into the mix for those particular types of things. And then we brought in like the rest of the team.
Well, this at this point, this seems to be a good segue to move into the product mindset discussion. But before that, this just I'm curious to understand. And as an ex-founder, even when I was building my last startup, we had to go through a phase of pivot. Uh, was there an element of fear or confusion within the team when you spoke about this? And how did they take it, and how was that experience for you? Or was it smooth?
Yeah. No, it was not smooth. There was a lot of apprehension. One, people were like, okay, why yet another webinar tool? Are we going to compete with Zoom? Are we going to compete with someone else? Where are we going to play? Why are we going to play there? What's going to happen? And these questions are both from the tech folks as well as from the GTM folks. What's going to happen to our ACV? All of those things, right? So you need to be like super prepared with all the answers. And that is part of the analysis also, right? I mean, you're coming up with answers for yourself first. You need to be convinced. You need to build that conviction, and that is half the one battle, half the battle won. But at the same time, then there's a build phase also, right? So people need to be patient. GTM needs to be patient for the build phase to happen. In parallel, our head of marketing at the time did a great job of getting a lot of advisors on board from this target market once we decided, okay, this is what we need to do. Because those were the people who were giving us a lot of quick, continuous feedback in those 3 months of the build cycle as well, right? So just getting people whom we want to engage with in that particular market, that was like an important thing. So we built that conviction within ourselves by, again, just talking to the market, validating our assumptions, very quickly changing what we felt is not right. But at the same time, not leaving behind certain ideas that we thought would be out of the box, would be differentiators, would be swappers, because you got to do both, right? There's no point building a copy or something that has already been built where a customer is already using it for years. They need to see something different. Only then it's going to pique their interest. So, yes, there was an element of fear, there was uncertainty, and those fears or uncertainties got allayed only when we started selling and revenue started coming in. And then again, you have to keep checking, like, are we moving fast enough? Are we growing fast enough? What kind of early feedback are we getting from the customers? How do we need to quickly address it as opposed to continuing to build new features, right? So then again, then it's a question of balance, like where do we want to put our eggs? So yeah, it's a continuous thing.
What keeps you so balanced throughout this conversation? And we've spoken a couple of times before. You come off as a person who is calm. If I was working with you, maybe I wouldn't be able to imagine you ever shouting at me or getting angry over something. So two questions, like, do you ever get angry? And what keeps you so balanced?
Yes, of course I get angry. But I think it's more about, I don't know, maybe with a bit more experience, you tend to get calmer. And it's more about solving the problem at the end of the day, right? And you still need to communicate the message strongly to whoever it is. But at the same time, you don't have to shout, is what I feel, right? But yeah, the motivation, like as long as you have a team that is inherently motivated, I don't think there is any issue. The issue happens when someone does not have the motivation, or they are not keen enough to kind of put in everything. That's when the misalignment happens, right? So you try to bring people who have that inherent motivation, because I cannot create motivation for you. You have to have it in the first place. But yeah, it's more like, even though I may be calm here, there's like a lot going on inside about, okay, what are we doing? How are we going to get to our goals? All of that is definitely at the back of the mind.
So on that note of motivation, I think again now we'll come back to a product mindset uh, uh, part of the questions. Uh, the moment you said this word motivation, I started thinking about how I have understood product mindset, and that is me as a developer, as an engineer, or whatever my role be. I build things which people want,
Mm.
which will have a use case. Uh, and I think motivation to really understand from the user perspective is what probably constitutes a product mindset. So I think a question for you is how have you personally understood product mindset, and when you're looking for when you were getting your initial team in order, how did you evaluate for a product mindset in person? Because there are people who would be in that state where they would be happy to build whatever you tell them to.
Mm.
But maybe in a startup, at times we want them to really look at and question. Okay, if something is given, why don't you just question and maybe come back to us that okay, this is what I feel is not right about it. So, what is your whole take and understanding of?
Yeah, I'll give sort of a little bit of a historical reference and then come to the current state. Because in my experience, 10, 12 years ago, the engineers that I worked with or I met with, and again, the product management function in general was not that well defined, at least in India, right? So I used to work with a lot of engineers who would question things a lot before building anything. And it's almost like they did a portion of the product manager's job also, which is really question the CEO, the CTO about what is this going to get us, right? And that I think has reduced over the years. I feel a lot of cultural change has happened in the sense that, hey, the product manager is going to tell me what to build. My job is to build it. And it's almost happened in a way that I think now product managers are like spoon feeding engineers that this is what you need to build. And engineers are not questioning it. Okay, I will build it. That is very, very prevalent, which is a big concern, I would say. Um, so definitely you need people who are going to question a particular decision or going to critique a particular decision if you have not explained to them why we are doing something. And anyone with a product mindset is someone, it's a little tricky to define. You obviously need someone who is very, very good at, say, writing code or understanding architecture and building the product the right way. But when they ask you good questions which you have not thought about, where it could be around a feature's corner cases, or it could be around scale, it could be around what do we need to support for the next 6 months versus the next 3 years? How do I? So all those are going to be inputs to my design, right? That's when you really have those fun conversations. And that's what challenges a product manager also to know, have I thought about this well enough and deep enough? Because frankly, every product manager has their strengths in terms of a T and like in terms of a T, but they may be light in terms of other aspects of their skills, right? Some people will have a very strong design background, but a very poor technical background. So that person will not know when you say, how many backend requests should this support? Like that person will not know how to answer that question, correct? So when the engineering person has that product mindset, they are in a way going to fill the gaps or help the PM get better as well, right? Because do not assume the PM is the know-it-all, right? They don't, and we expect them to. And I think the other thing that has happened in the last 10 years is there's this great pressure on PMs to know everything. But they will have their extreme strengths and then they will have their weaknesses. I think it's a good, again, team conversation to have about, and a PM ideally should talk to their pod in this way. Ki guys, look, I am not an expert in this particular area. I'm looking for guidance from you guys. So continuously question me over there. Get all the information that you need from me over there and let's brainstorm about it. Ultimately, I think product mindset, you summarized it well, is building the right thing. Once you build the right thing, the people who are supposed to use it will use it. But building the right thing has so many different nuances that not one person, in this case the PM, can have answers for all of it. So it is going to be that PM, engineer, designer group that's going to come up with that. And of course, there are other things that the PM has to take care about positioning, giving that input to the product marketing team, pricing, giving that input to the sales team. All of those things are there, which the PM needs to take more responsibility about. But yes, the product mindset have being set in the engineering team is super critical for that entire team to work very well.
I think if we look at it, there is tech, then there is product, and there's the business. So product is sort of the team which is bridging both the tech and business into one place. And with this logic, uh, product seems to be okay. Business seems to be an extension of the product, right? That Sorry, I think it's the other way around. Product seems to be an extension of the business that while, of course, maybe you had your internal roadmap which said that, okay, on a Zoom, maybe right now it's high time that we bring AI summaries. But you see a demand in the market where people really want to use breakout rooms as well. So how do you decide which one to build first? And looking at the demand, you consciously choose that, okay, we'll go ahead with the breakout rooms feature. With this, I want to ask you, you've been a techie all your life and then building Hubilo. So that transition from a tech to a business role, uh, what was new for you when this happened, and what was your own internal learning journey? What are the things that you picked up along the way, and some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a huge shift moving over from tech and then to product and like including GTM. Uh, you don't know how difficult the role of a salesperson is until you actually like play it in some way, or you are watching someone from close quarters. You don't know how difficult the role of a marketing person is until you've watched them in close quarters. So just getting exposure to how these teams work, how the really good ones execute at their job, all those were big, big learnings. And also being challenged by them in terms of any product decisions, because a lot of product decisions many times tend to get happen in silos between the product managers or within the product team or between the product and CEO or just between product and engineering. But you ignore sometimes what the customer support or success team has to say, what the marketing team, product marketing or sales has to say about your decision. So I think you learn very quickly that you should have involved more people in this decision. But then you also learn that you shouldn't involve everyone in every decision, because then you will always be in this cycle of decision making, right? So figuring out which decision requires multiple people to give you inputs versus which does not, that's a skill that you will develop over time. Just developing respect for the other person's profession and their experience. I think sometimes as PMs or engineers, we tend to get arrogant. We say, oh, we are the rulers of the world. If we don't build this, what are you going to sell? like there's a certain attitude that you could end up developing. So just being wary of, okay, everyone is part of this in this together, and I better talk to the market. Who's the second best apart from the market is the person who is talking more than me to the market, which is sales. Right. So just get talking to them multiple times in a month on various things. It's great that now we have tools like Gong and Fireflies because you can record these calls. You don't have to go into a meeting to understand what happened in those sales conversations. And just making it a practice within the product team to listen to sales conversations every week. That in itself will educate you a lot about the market. So all of those were like big shifts for me in my thinking. It also humbles you. It gives you more insight, and it just prepares you to become a better PM, right? And then you get exposed to, oh, this is how GTM works. That's actually very interesting. Can I take on more on that side? Then you start contributing to, say, product marketing first. Then you start contributing to hey, I noticed in our sales cycle, this one aspect is not working well. The sales people are not highlighting this particular feature that I think needs to be highlighted. So then you start improving your win rate or contributing to that, right? So then salespeople start respecting you as a PM. They don't just see you as a feature delivery person. They see you as like a partner, right? So that's how you start like building those bridges, building those relationships. You get better at it, and then you can take on like broader roles, right? So that to me was the big few shifting points.
And in this journey, how has your relationship with your CTO evolved? Uh, mm, I think I would want to go back to the early days of the startup. What were the conversations then between the CTO and the CEO, and how have they evolved in the last few years?
Hmm. I think in the early days, most of the alignment or misalignment would be on what should we build, like what is expectation of quality that each of us had. Those were the discussions that were happening. Are we moving fast enough? Those types of things. But over the years, what happens is you tend to get on, okay, this is how my mindset is, this is how the CTO's mindset is. We know our strengths, we know what we care about really. So all of those then become like natural. They are, the understanding is so much better after a couple of years of working with each other, right? Those then evolve into different types of discussions, which is how should we make our teams better in terms of empowering them with decision making. Sometimes you may feel that a lot of decisions are blocked on the CTO, but how do you now up level other people on the team to get better at decisions versus relying for everything on the CTO? So that's more of evolution of the engineering team and also our discussions, because then the CTO can spend his time or her time on something different, on something related to architecture, or like spending their time on a net new innovation that requires a proof of concept. Like anything could be there, right? So the conversations now are more about how do we elevate the team, how do we make sure that our processes are there in place, so that for everything the CTO is not required. Um, how do we continue to innovate? What other tools are we looking at? What new tools can we just experiment with over the next couple of months? So those become the types of decisions. Of course, the underlying business as usual piece is um, what is the roadmap looking like? What are the blockers? Why are the number of bugs so high this month? All of those things are business as usual. But we've also gotten into this rhythm of, okay, we understand each other much better. Let's figure out how to evolve the team, empower the team in a better way, so that the CTO can then go do other things.
On that very specific example, like why have the number of bugs gone up for this particular maybe quarter or overall, whatever the duration of project be? Uh, how has the answer to it evolved? And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. For a very long period of time, engineering has relatively been a black box. A lot of it is your understanding or maybe your own intuition or experience of something, and you'll say, okay, maybe this is the reason and this is why it is happening. Uh, but it is a multivariable equation. There's so many things that go into it now. Now when people are trying to break down the whole SDLC into smaller cycle times and maybe tracking quality at different aspects of it, and now basically the answers are much more data driven. uh, but in your experience, how has this answer evolved for you? And can you give us an example of what would be a good answer to a question like this from from a CEO's perspective? Uh, yeah, like what would you expect your CTO to tell you on this?
My pet peeve from engineering in general is this code was written 2 years ago by a very poor developer and it cannot be fixed quickly. That's my pet peeve because when we were writing it, I would have been told, oh, this is the best team we have and we are writing amazing code, right? So that's like a pet peeve. So that is one answer that I get, which I don't necessarily like. But at the same time, I don't think it's their fault because 2 years ago we were also going all guns blazing and the pressure was on them to like just put things on production as opposed to checking for code quality, to be very frank. So I think as long as all parties understand the reasons and that is the truth, um, that is what I would like it to be, as opposed to just getting some hand wavy answers or just to make me happy, telling me like a white lie. All that just, that's not what I would enjoy listening to. Um, but at the same time, I think as if you spend enough time with a team for over a period of a couple of years, um, it also helps when you have the same people because you can go back and give references, right? We can say that, hey, let's learn from that experience where we thought the feature is easy to build, but then it didn't turn out to be that way. So let's do a POC quickly and figure out, right? So you continuously then learn from that. Or we say that we forgot to do performance testing in that particular feature. Is that part of our process now? If it's not, then let's do that. Um, for me, a great answer in general, whether it's number of bugs or if it's a feature discussion or expectation setting in terms of timelines, would be that here are the pros and cons of these two approaches. Like I might be the one saying I need this in 2 weeks because there is a customer deadline. But then the well-informed answer back to me would be that is possible to do, but these are the pitfalls. Are you okay with these pitfalls? And this is something that we do regularly at Hubilo, and we used to do regularly at Blue Jeans also, which was at a larger scale. Is whenever we feel that a particular pitfall is actually going to be detrimental to the customer experience, we actually go back to the customer and push back on them. We go back to sales and push back on them because you don't want to solve a problem and introduce three other problems, right? So this is where openness in that communication, as opposed to feeling the pressure to say yes all the time, comes into play. And that's where engineering leaders need to step up and stand up and communicate this very clearly to the rest of the folks who are customer facing. Um, that to me, that is what tells me that, okay, this person is actually thinking through from the business angle, not just wants to check a box, not just wants to say, I met my goal of this deadline, right? So that is how I think things have evolved. And that is kind of my preferred way of communication for anything, whether it's the number of bugs or a new feature or a commitment or anything.
And what kind of reports do you find useful? I'll give you some context on this. Uh,
Mm.
I learned it the hard way. Uh, During our investors meeting, or you know, they have a certain expectation, and then we going to them, oh, this is what we did, this is what we did, X, Y, Z, A, B, C.
Yeah.
And then you hear from them that, okay, it's been 30 minutes you've been speaking and I don't have any relevant piece of information. So,
Mm.
and then you learn from these mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and similarly, here at Dev Dynamics, so I usually I work directly with my CEO, and I've seen my own reports get better. I remember the first report which I did to him when I joined, and now they're
Yeah.
becoming more crisper and more subjective. Initially, it used to be very hard numbers. This is what we did, and this is the performance. But now there is a layer of analysis on top of it.
Mm.
Uh, so it is less of text. I mean, less of story. So,
Mm.
sorry, story may not be the right, but there is story, but less
Mm.
of numbers and jargons all around. Uh, for you, for a CEO, what is the best kind of report, and what is it that CTOs can do to report better?
Yeah. I think expectation setting is probably the first thing one needs to do, which is don't like boil the ocean and get all kinds of numbers which your CEO perhaps doesn't care about. So just have a quick 15-minute discussion about, hey, what are the 5 things that you would want to understand on a monthly basis, right? And maybe the CEO is going to tell you, I need to know the number of P0 issues or outages that we had, the reasons for it, and what are we doing to prevent them, right? So that's like business critical, because whenever there's an outage, it means a customer is going, right? Or a few are going. And it's ever so important in technologies like Blue Jeans and Hubilo, where everything is real time, like communication, right? We are talking here. If there's an outage in Zoom,
Yeah.
then you're not going to be happy about it, as opposed to a different, like non-real time application where maybe a few hours of not having it is not going to break. So yeah, again, so that context is important about how critical your product is for that business. Uh, Two, how are we improving our team's efficiency, whether it is automation? How much are we doing the mundane manual stuff, which I think our team is also going to be bored of, as opposed to investing in automation. And even if it is bit by bit, over a course of a year, you can actually automate a large amount of your code, right? So that would be the second thing. Three, what's the interaction? And again, I don't know how to measure this, but something for the CTO or the head of product to kind of look into would be uh, what are the kind of interactions or discussions happening between PMs and QA and the engineers, the developers, right? Because that trifecta basically determines how good the quality of the product is going to be. So, do they discuss corner scenarios enough? Are they right? What is the nature of those P0s, nature of those P1s that have happened? Are those edge cases? Are those straightforward cases? They better be edge cases. If they're straightforward cases, someone is absolutely not doing their job. But how do we prevent those edge cases? So are we thinking deep enough? So that quality of discussion is something that I would like to know about. And then how are we doing against the roadmap plan that we have, right? What are the items that product team is doing discovery on? What are the items that product team understands from our existing customers are important to them? What are the features that are going to production over the next couple of weeks? Uh, I would love to test those out. So where can I do it? Involve me in the demos, like all those things. So, but in terms of the reporting, I would love to understand how are we faring against the roadmap commitments that we have. And even if we have to make some choices, like what are the reasons behind those choices, which is where the product team comes into play.
Building on that, tech debt has been sometimes I feel it is one of the favorite topics for tech leaders when you talk to them. Uh, but we all know startups have been an environment of trade-offs, right? A lot of
Mm.
trade-offs you're doing, and at times this tech debt takes a backseat.
Mm.
Uh, okay, so maybe the question here would be that while you have your own roadmap, you have so many things to handle. Uh, and of course, there are certain crises which needs immediate attention.
Mm.
What would be a good answer coming from a tech leader,
Mm.
telling you, informing you about the tech debt and why it is necessary to address it at that moment,
Mm.
which also means that you're derailing your product roadmap.
Yeah, yeah. So I wouldn't bucket it that way to start with, that the roadmap and tech debt are two different things. To me, it's all part of the roadmap. It just depends on the context or the importance of that item. For example, over the next 6 months, if we have clarity that we need to build, say, a new product, or we need to enhance a particular product in a certain way, and the CTO is aware of it, the engineering team is aware of it. If they have 10 tech debt items that they know are important, ideally, they should map those tech debt items to what is important for the roadmap, which means that is important for the business, and say that is a precursor to what you want to achieve in 6 months, right? That makes it very easy for me to get convinced that 6 months we have to do that, but this tech debt item is going to actually block that particular item, so we might as well invest over there, right? So bringing any tech debt item and highlighting it or associating it with an already existing roadmap item is probably one way to like convince the CEO about it or the product team about it. The second is if there's a tech debt item that is really causing pain to existing customers, then the CTO and the product person should work closely to figure out what is the potential negative effect on the revenue because of that particular issue, right? So when that happens, the product manager is actually making the case for that tech debt, not the CTO. Because the product manager doesn't want to be questioned that, oh, why are we having more churn? Because when you dig deep enough, it would mean that the product manager knew that the churn is being caused because of these bugs or these things, the root cause of which is that tech debt that needs to be solved. So they didn't bring it up loudly enough, would then be the case, right? So that partnership between CTO and product would be super helpful to prioritize another piece of tech debt. Everything else to me would then be a nice to have, which can be parked. But then if that tech debt needs to be picked up, that better be a roadmap item because only then can you prioritize things, right? So there is a tendency in teams to create different buckets of lists. I like to have one list which has everything because only then you can choose the top 10, right? And that top 10 needs to be aligned with what we want to achieve in the next 3 months. So that's how I see it. And that becomes a very easy discussion as opposed to simply saying, here's a list of tech debt items that we just got to get done.
Yeah. I think straight away being able to link that with a immediate business priority is something that helps. Uh, Shailesh, on that note, I think I'm almost done with all the questions I had. But on parting notes, on closing notes, I see a lot of my friends, young people, juniors, they are getting into entrepreneurship, which means that, and I'm talking about techies in this case, like uh, you coming from a maybe a director level experience or VP level experience, and then now straight away you jump into being a founder where you're extending your arms beyond everything that you've done in the past. Something which you already spoke earlier that you getting exposed to GTM, you realizing that okay, sales is not that easy. So, what is your any word of advice or any learning that you can share for them?
Yeah, people who are coming specifically from the tech background, getting into building products or building companies, I would just say that doing customer research in the right way while maintaining your intuition or instinct about what a particular market needs, that to me will accelerate your roadmap. So instead of first building a product and testing it, you will know exactly what to build or 80% there, and then that will give you better success. So just getting better at research skills because that may not come naturally to us as engineers because we are more into, hey, how do we build this system? How do we break this system? How do we make the UI nice? All of those things that is where we tend to focus on. But just at a very fundamental level, asking the right questions, and there are many books out there. There are many courses about it. So it can be learned over a week's time, and then you put it into practice, and you keep getting better at it. There's books like Mom's Test, Continuous Discovery Habits. All these books really give you like simple to complex frameworks to do that. And putting that in place also in writing then tells you after a year about how the product has evolved, how your insights have evolved, right? So those things really make a difference, and that can then be shared with your hopefully, but with that knowledge, you build a product and it starts selling. That becomes the source of knowledge for your first marketer to come on board, for your first salesperson to come on board, and understand those insights, because that's how then they write the messaging, they write the copy, they sell, they create the script. It just becomes super easy once you have that core fundamental knowledge that you have gathered yourself, right? So I would just, my 2 cents would be to really get good at discovery and understand what people are saying and what they are not saying, because only then you're able to uncover things like pricing or willingness to pay, whether they will move from what they're doing right now to a new product. Again, B2C, B2B again will be lot different than each other, but some of those fundamentals would be the same. So yeah, just getting better at discovery, I think, would 10x your output.
Yeah, and I think with this, uh, when you hire your first functional heads or functional roles, they expect some level of clarity coming from you before they can get started. So,
Yes.
doing all the homework which you mentioned, I think serves as a great way for the first marketer or for the first salesperson to really come in. Maybe it's a new persona that the salesperson is selling to, and then you being able to give those insights can definitely help that guy. Uh, well, it was a great conversation, Shailesh. I do hope that we get to meet in person and do this again. There's a lot that has been left uncovered, and a lot more to discuss and talk. But really appreciate you taking the time and speaking to us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Himanshu. Really nice being here.
You were listening to Shailesh on the Engineering Success Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for more.